Hey everybody, it's Jason Blaha here, and I had a subscriber ask if I think it's okay for people to use supersets for their accessory work. So let me put on my +5 hat of weaponsmithing, do a little bit of crafting, and let's talk about this. Alright, I guess it depends on what you are defining as supersets, because you get into arguments out there with people and they have different ideas on what they mean by supersets. Now I'm going to say for certain types of accessory work, opposing muscle group supersets might actually have a valid place in there for your accessory work, and we'll get to that in just a bit. But, and that's going to depend on certain types. Now, as far as other types of supersetting, which usually means doing multiple exercises back to back, 2 or more exercises for the same basic muscle groups, I think that is probably one of the worst forms of training ever invented. From a physiology perspective, that's a terrible idea, and I know lots of guys who are like, well, this bodybuilder did it, or that bodybuilder did it, or whoever, and they gained a bunch of muscle doing it. They didn't do it because of it. They gained muscle in spite of it. And it goes to show you that sometimes you can use less effective, inefficient training methods and still gain muscle. And on top of that, they're probably on a hefty dose of drugs, and it also goes to show you how big of a margin of error drugs can give people for just gaining size. They give you a bigger margin of error, and people can get away with really stupid shit like that. And that's just the reality of it. But when you think about it, if you step back and look at the physiology behind that muscle fiber recruitment, it's not really that great. You would be better off just picking one exercise and doing, straight sets, or even a rest pause set. It would be so much better. Even worse, the pre-exhaustion type supersets. Again, that's probably the worst thing I've ever seen invented. For a host of reasons. That's almost worthy of its own video, and I'm pretty sure, I know I've done a video on that in the past, of why that really is problematic. And I know guys are going to say, well, I tried it and it worked. But it's like, again, what I love with Helms put an analogy out there of what he said, that people over-convolute and overcomplicate things to the point to where they get up and their goal was to get through a door, and they hopped on one foot 3 times and spun in 3 left circles and said alakazam, and then turned the doorknob and opened it, and used the fact that they made it through the door as proof that their ritual worked. And people are really bad about that in training, when the fact that they made it through the door was because they turned the doorknob and opened it and walked through it. The other stuff wasn't that important. But in their mind, because they did that first, and that's how people treat a lot of training approaches, because they did all that extra mumbo jumbo, they're convinced that that's what got them through the door, when the reality is they would have got through the door a hair faster had they not wasted that time hopping around on one foot. It didn't actually help them. It slowed them down, but they still made it through the door. But that's certainly not the best way to get through the door. There's faster and better ways to get through a door than doing that little ritual first. But, and I thought that was an amazing analogy that Dr. Helms had made about that before years ago. And it's quite funny when you think about it. Pre-exhaustion supersets are kind of exactly what that is. Exactly the same sort of situation we're talking about there. Now, opposing muscle group supersets. All right. You know what? The argument that is made there usually is that obviously opposing muscle group supersets might, in theory, make you tired on the different exercises, and you might not recover enough that it might cause problems with performance. There have been a few studies out there, these are not the majority, this is not conclusive, that has shown that at least on some single joint exercises, and for those who don't know what that means, isolation movements, that's basically a scientific term for isolation movements. Single joint. A curl, only one joint's involved. Tricep extension, only one joint is involved. Single joint movements. Trying to work one muscle, although we know that's impossible. You're trying to just work one muscle. What they have found on those, there have been some that showed slight benefits to doing that it in some way, it was almost like an active recovery between the sets, and it helped a little bit. Others haven't shown the same conclusions. So that's kind of up in the air, but for single joint movements, it doesn't seem to hurt performance. All right, it doesn't seem to hurt performance. So if it doesn't seem to hurt performance, and there's a small chance it can help it, and it gets you out of the gym faster, I don't have a problem with anyone doing that, particularly their single joint little small isolation accessory work, and even strength athletes do isolation work, and a lot of physique guys need to understand that. There are strength athletes who do them because they can be helpful with some of what they're doing. If you're struggling on certain parts of a press, getting a little more tricep development isn't a bad thing. All right, a lot of power lifters actually do a lot of tricep extensions. If you're concerned about tearing a bicep, doing a deadlift, you could train your biceps to be stronger when under a stretch. All right, incline curls, that's a perfect example. Incline curls could, in some cases, help prevent bicep tears on the deadlift. And that makes sense, They just have the added side effect of giving you more bicep size to go with it. That's a side effect for the power lifter. Now, a bodybuilder will do the incline curls because they're a damn good exercise for the biceps. They stretch and contract the bicep in a unique way that most other types of curls don't. Plenty of golden era bodybuilders felt they were the best bicep exercise, and that's subject to debate. We start talking about things like best, very subjective. But they felt that, so for them that was used to build the biceps. For a power lifter, it might be used to strengthen the connective tissue, and the stretch position is the goal, with the added benefit of, hey, their biceps got bigger. So there are strength athletes who do that. So of course, if a strength athlete wanted more tricep and he wanted to do incline curls, yeah, he could get out of the gym quicker if he just did them in a superset, does his incline curls, then does his dumbbell tricep extensions, then a set of incline curls and dumbbell tricep extensions, gets his 3 sets out of the way of each, and he's out of there in like 3 minutes. He's done. Like 3 minutes of accessory work isolation, he can walk out the door. Doesn't have to come in and spend 15 minutes of his gym time doing it. I think that is one of the primary benefits of supersets. Let's just be honest here. Spending more time training than you actually have to get the desired results, even to get maximum results, is silly. All right? It's silly unless you really love being in the gym, but at a certain point, you're talking about exercise addiction versus actually goal setting, because there's other stuff you could be doing with that time. An extra 20 minutes spent in the gym doing something non-productive, not helping you in any way, just because you waited longer, because you wanted to space those 2 or 3 little isolation exercises out, probably not worth it. You know, like I said, that's up to each person, but you could have spent that time doing something more productive with your life that you enjoyed more rather than sitting on the bench at the gym. You know, just saying. And if it doesn't seem to hurt performance significantly and might even help it, there's nothing lost there. You're done in 3 minutes. You got what you needed. You can get in, get out. I don't think that one's up for debate. I think that's perfectly acceptable. The ones that we might debate would be bigger compound movements. That's where we might debate it, because there could be a real performance loss. Let's say that you're coming in and you want to do floor presses and pen lay rows in a superset. Now we're dealing with multi-joint, big compound opposing muscle group accessory exercises. Could that be considered acceptable for accessory exercises? Could it reduce performance? Yeah, it could, particularly because those pen lay rows need your peripheral nervous system fresh. You might have to wait longer to get the full explosiveness between sets because your peripheral nervous system is still getting used on the floor press. But what I might suggest there is that maybe if you're not doing the floor presses explosively, maybe you're not pushing it that hard, it still might be okay. But the thing is, it might not save you time in the gym. But what I would ask is, you have to step back and ask, does it really matter? Meaning, do you really want to spend the extra 10, 15 minutes getting both accessory exercises in separately, or just go ahead and do them together? I think that can only be answered by asking yourself 2 questions. Number 1, how important is maximum performance on that specific accessory to you, or are you just using it for general accessory purposes? Meaning, most people who come in and do accessory work is done for what purpose? To create additional fatigue in a weak point. Either a weak point in an exercise or a weak point in a muscle. Meaning it could be a tricep weakness, it could be a pec weakness, it could be a hamstring weakness overall, so you just want to get the muscle bigger. Well, the muscle gets bigger through fatigue, right? You fatigue it, you come in and you just put some fatigue work in. If you're already tired from doing other exercises, does that really mean you're getting any less fatigue in the muscles? Minimally, probably not a big deal. So what if you have to lift a little less? It's just an accessory to put more workload on that muscle. The floor press is probably what you're doing. That's what you've got to ask. Are you just doing it for general fatigue? Because that's what at least half of accessory work is done for. It's just done to put extra fatigue, to shore up a weak point from a hypertrophy perspective. All right, that's all it is. Others are dealing with specific performance elements, or we're even dealing with a weakness in a joint angle specificity. All right, that floor press, some would say, no, that's joint angle because it's pausing just above the chest. Not really. Honestly, that's not the real reason you do a floor press. You do a floor press to build up the pecs and triceps more using a strict movement to which you can't use leg drive or hip drive. The floor press is more difficult. It's harder. It isolates the chest and triceps more, and it doesn't allow you to use the leg drive. And because you're driving a weight sometimes right at the chest, maybe an inch off the chest, for me, a floor press touches my chest, barely touches it. You're having to do dead stop training without any ability of leg drive to improve that. So it's good for general buildup, and it's good for building more starting strength off the chest because you're having to use the muscles to do it, and you're not able to use any hip drive to help pop that first inch. So that's where that comes in. There is a joint angle specificity component. Could that be compromised? Or the same thing with the pin leg row. You're using it to build explosiveness off the floor and all those muscles. Could that specific performance element be potentially compromised? Yeah, it could be compromised by doing them in a superset because of the neural components to it, the peripheral nervous system components of specific performance elements. However, you've got to ask is, how important is it to you? If you're doing an accessory exercise very specifically because you have a very glaring weak point in performance, such as your pop off the floor on your deadlift, all right, then that pin leg row might be important enough that you need to separate it out. Pop off your chest with the pause bench, then yeah, that exercise might be important enough that you need to space it out, all right, because you have a glaring weakness that needs to be addressed. However, if it's just being done for general buildup, you're worried about developing those weaknesses and you're just being proactive with it, I would say it would be fine to superset them. You'll get out of the gym faster. You'll be out of the gym 5-10 minutes faster maybe, and not have to goof around with stuff that you don't need to, and you'll go ahead and get your extra training and fatigue in those areas. The fact that it won't be maximum performance doesn't matter because you're not addressing a real weak point yet. You're simply addressing one proactively. You're putting in some work just to prevent it. It probably doesn't matter. And in that case, I think it would be perfectly acceptable to go ahead and superset them if you're doing so just to get yourself out of the gym faster but still get the work in. Perfectly acceptable. So the question really isn't a yes or no, is it acceptable? It needs to be looked at on an exercise by exercise and case by case basis. But yes, in many cases, it's perfectly acceptable to superset antagonistic lifts and antagonistic muscle groups just to get out of the gym faster on your accessory work. All right, guys, but that's really all I have to say on that today. I hope it's been informative, and I will talk to you guys next time.